Welcome to Zen Footsteps. My podcast is designed to invite you to explore new perspectives and challenge the way you see the world. Through engaging conversations with thought-provoking guests, we're going to delve into the idea that you can transform your thinking and inspire personal growth. From redefining success to uncovering unconventional paths to fulfillment, each episode is a step towards expanding your mind and embracing the journey of discovery. So join us as we walk alongside innovators, thinkers, and change makers who can help you see life in a whole new light. Hi guys, welcome to Zen Footsteps. Today is probably the most important guest I've ever had on my show, and that's because it's my wife.
Correct.
See,
To introduce me.
Well trained. There you go. We had a chat about this because you've got a wealth of knowledge, and we bounce off each other, don't we? Because I do musculoskeletal, and you're more kind of on the kind of the medical side, functional medicine side. So I thought, let's get you on and talk about your goals in relation to health, how you got into health. Now, I know when we talked about this, you started, for those who don't know, St. John's, is St. John's an international organization?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
So you got into St. John's as your first journey into healthcare, but you also said prior to that, actually you're quite squeamish. So tell me, what was the journey right from a young girl into I know what it is, but let's tell the audience, how did that start?
Well, I've always been somebody who's just curious about things in general.
Yeah.
Right from a young age, I would read Reader's Digest. Remember those?
Yeah.
Loved the medical section in there. Probably read stuff that was a bit age inappropriate at some points. But I've always had this interest in the human body, how life works, nature, animals, etc., etc. So I read quite widely, but I never saw myself as having a career in healthcare. When I was young, if people said, "Oh, what do you want to do when you grow up?" I used to say I wanted to be a teacher. So that was my early instinct, was towards education and teaching. Then when I was in my early 20s, hadn't really decided in which direction I wanted to go. At that point, I knew I wanted to do something that helped people in some capacity. I just wasn't sure what that would look like. And my brother at the time, who was 10 years younger than me, had always wanted to join the ambulance service right from when he was tiny. And my dad and Nathan, joined St. John Ambulance. So my dad had to join with him because they didn't have any young people in that particular division. So dad and Nathan joined, and dad then tried to persuade me to join. And I said to him, "Look, there's no way. It's a really bad idea. I get squeamish. I just can't see myself doing it." And he kept on trying to persuade me and just saying, "Look, just try it. You get to do a really good first aid course. You only have to do 50 hours of duty a year if you really don't like it." So to anybody who's not familiar with St. John Ambulance, they do a lot of first aid provision for events and stuff across the UK, as well as being very involved in first aid training and so forth. So I finally decided that, okay, fine, I would give it a go. Worst case scenario, I could I could always just leave if I thought it was really that bad. So I joined, did my first aid at work course as my initial training in St. John Ambulance, nearly passed out as part of that, which was very embarrassing.
What did you pass out? What happened? You haven't told me this. Why?
I thought I had.
No.
Yeah.
So how did you pass out? What happened?
We were doing the episode on how you deal with wounds and bleeding, etc.
Okay.
And they had pictures of different wounds up on the wall, on the projector. And I was like, "Oh no, it's really hot in here." And I thought, actually, wait a minute, it's not hot in here. Like, I am feeling really faint. So I had to leg it outside. Somebody realised and followed me out. They were like, "Are you okay?" Thankfully, I didn't faint.
But they didn't have, like, in the small holding. So a small holding, I don't even know. Give me the definition of a small holding. How many acres? What classifies as a small
Oh
holding?
yes, at the time, to set the context as well, my parents had a small holding. In fact, my mum still has it. So they've got I say they. My dad's died recently, so I still keep saying they. Um, so my mum has 4.5 acres. So really anything, I don't know what the actual definition
Okay.
is. I think it's anywhere up until about 25 acres counts as a small holding. So it can
Okay.
be very large, very small. And they, at that time, I think we had goats, we had sheep, we had the pigs at that point. Um, Essentially a lot of animals around.
So, because the reason I ask that is because, like if you're on a small holding or a farm, there's going to be things where animals are injured. So you weren't
Yeah.
squeamish about that?
No, that was fine.
Okay, so it's the human
I
aspect
think
that,
it was the human
okay,
aspect of
got it.
it that
Yeah.
made me go, oh, that's now where I'm feeling squeamish.
Okay.
And probably having the small holding got me used to, getting my hands
Yeah,
dirty.
yeah.
Like you can't keep clean and tidy. So that didn't bother me. I was quite comfortable with that. But when it was wounds on people,
Right.
etc., that's when I would, that's when it had the capacity to make me feel rather unwell. So I didn't think it was going to go well at
Okay.
all.
So you were outside at this point. Somebody came out, and then did you think that was it? Carte blanche, done, never coming back, or
No, because I can be a bit stubborn
really?
and
Oh, do you hear that? Admission recorded on tape.
on tape.
Hopefully, my mother-in-law is going to listen to this as evidence as well that her daughter is stubborn.
She knows that I am. So I can be a bit stubborn. And I also, probably like everybody,
Mm.
like I want to appear stronger than I am at times. So I just styled it out
Right.
and completed the rest of the first aid course, passed it, and then started going out on duties as a St John member. And to cut a long story short, essentially just found I really enjoyed it. I can't remember at the point at which that flip happened. I think it
Mm.
was probably like that slow realization of, oh, I actually really like helping people when they need help. And at some point, then that morphed into, I want to do this for a job.
So you've gone from St. John's, you've done your basics and stuff,
Mhm.
and then at that point you're looking at going in to become a paramedic. Was that the next step, or how to go next?
Yeah, so where the St John division that I worked for, where I say worked, it was all voluntary, but where I helped out, there was also the option to start expanding your skills so you could learn to do what I'm not sure what the terms are now because I left St John quite a long time ago, but you could do essentially a course so that you could work on one of the ambulances. You could learn to use oxygen, Entonox, or laughing gas, as a lot of people know it, for pain relief. So kind of upped my skills a bit in terms of what was
Okay.
available to me, was able to drive the ambulance, etc., etc. And I knew, I think at that point, that I wanted to join the ambulance service. So initially, back then, becoming a paramedic was not a degree program to become a paramedic. You used to join the ambulance service as a trainee emergency medical technician, do your training, work as a technician for, I think it was a year. I never ended up going that route, hence the reason I'm slightly vague about it.
Mm.
And then you would then do your paramedic course on top of that. So that was how it would work. Join the ambulance service, they would essentially then train you up and you'd get to the point where you hit the criteria to register
Okay,
as a paramedic.
so in the same way when I was auxiliary nursing, you'd learn on the job and you'd learn a new skill, and then your qualification wasn't because you'd been to university or anything. It's just you had acquired the skills and you
They
particularly.
did intensive training, don't get
Okay,
me
right,
wrong. So
yeah,
you do, I think I think it was like about a 16-week training to become a technician.
okay,
I'm not sure, again, as I said, because I didn't go that route, but you
okay,
do intensive training and then you go out on the job, do the job for a while, and then you could then progress
okay.
on to do your paramedic training. I came in at the cusp of them transitioning over to a university route into the profession.
Yeah.
So it was still not at the point where you needed to have a degree to register as a paramedic, because in the UK, being a paramedic, it's a registered title. Nobody can
Okay.
call themselves a paramedic.
Protected
It's a
title,
protected
like
title.
chiropractors were protected title.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I ended up waiting a little while until that route became open. So I applied to Swansea University for the first intake of paramedics or student paramedics, I should say, in Wales. And I got a place on that first intake. So that was a 2-year higher education diploma that I did.
Right. Okay. So we've now gone from there into
Hmm.
being a paramedic. So what's the next step? What's the next journey from there? Because most people, they become a paramedic and that's it for life. Your job, you're done, and that's it. What was the transition for you that you kind of thought this is kind of it's not enough for me. I need to push this a bit more. What changed?
So the first year of working as a new paramedic, it's a steep learning curve. There was a lot to learn, and I was essentially taken up with just getting the foundation
Mm,
of the role, I guess, like really embedded and for it to become more second nature. And after a while, I got to the point where I was comfortable seeing a lot of the presentations. I no longer had that, having to think about every single little thing. And as I got into my probably second year of being a paramedic, I realized that there were areas where I needed to learn more in able to be able to provide the optimal care. So at that point, when I trained as a paramedic, it was very much centered around emergency care. And rightly so. That essentially is what the career started out, or the profession started out as, was that provision of emergency
mm,
care, get the person to hospital. But then more and more as the demands on the health service have grown, and this is only more so now, not all of our patients needed hospital. And I realized that I needed to upskill my own knowledge and my own skills in order to be able to deliver better care for patients. So I started looking around for a potential top-up degree. So as I mentioned, I had a higher education diploma. It wasn't a full degree at that point. And there was a course offered by a BSc top-up course offered by Hertfordshire University that was lots of it was distance learning, but then we'd go on site 4 times a year. And that appealed to me because I needed some distance learning because I couldn't obviously travel to Hertfordshire from Wales every, every
mm.
week or whenever they needed me to. So, but equally, I wanted some face-to-face contact as well. So, like Open University, I didn't really want to go that option. So I did that BSc top up, which really helped me to gain some more knowledge, some more skills, and enable me to, better deliver care to people. And I wasn't even there that day actually because I was sick, but somebody from Southeast Coast Ambulance Service came to talk to my cohort and talked about the specialist paramedic role that they had within Southeast Coast Ambulance Service, whereby you essentially specialised in urgent and emergency care. So you learned a whole extra load of knowledge and skills around the lower acuity conditions that we would often see as paramedics. The people with chest infections who didn't necessarily need to be in A&E, but what do you do for them, particularly if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you can't get hold of a GP? So I was really intrigued by this and then decided to apply for that job. Essentially, to cut a very long story short, applied for the job, got offered a position, and I moved over to the southeast of England from West Wales.
Okay, which is quite a transition because
Mm.
what's quite interesting is if we now come fast forward. I mean, you and I met when you were working in primary care in a GP. So for
Hmm.
those of you listening abroad in America and other countries, GP is general practitioner, so it's doctor. And so again, that's something in the UK we see now. Some will go along and they'll say, they might say at the GPs, "Oh, we booked you with the paramedic."
Mm.
So how is it that that happens? How does it happen that GPs end up taking on paramedics? What's the story of that?
Well, it's probably helpful to explain how I ended up in
Yeah.
my primary care role.
Okay.
Um, so when I did my specialist training with Southeast Coast, it was essentially a postgrad diploma undertaken over a 3-year period, 2-year period, excuse me. So we do the academic element. We'd also do a lot of placements alongside of it, and we would also sit specialist practice exams. So it's 3 components: the academic part, specialist practice exams, and lots of
Right.
placements. one of those placements, essentially the one that you do right at the end, just to consolidate all of the learning that's taken place, was an 8-week GP placement.
Okay.
So I did my GP placement in a surgery, and week 3 of me being there, the practice manager called me in and said, look, if you're interested, there's a job offer on the table.
I mean, just for those of you who don't, well, you obviously don't know, but we end up doing things like we'll go to the pub one night for a drink, and there was a doctor there that I know locally, and I introduced Naomi to this doctor, and next thing I know, she's been offered a job. This happens to us a lot, unfortunately, or fortunately, unfortunately. We go out and life happens to us. Okay, so this is the bit for me why I suppose I was interested in getting you on and talking about this, because both, we met, you were in that position, and then there was a massive, massive shift for both you and I in our, because I was complementary as a chiropractor and nutritionist and hypnotherapist and all that kind of stuff, and you were sort of on the other side of the fence, really. But then there was that big shift to where the story is going to lead, and which we'll finish off with, and what I think is really exciting, and what's happening generally in medicine. So if we fast forward to now, and your journey into private practice, into becoming a lecturer at the well-known university, which is interesting because I didn't realize about when you told me about the teaching thing. I didn't realize you always wanted to be a teacher, and so.
Do you want me to talk about the teaching at this
Yes,
point?
so
Because
go,
I feel like we can then
yeah,
tie everything up
like
together at the end.
so tell me how we got from primary care and into teaching.
No, so I worked for Southeast Coast Ambulance Service, doing my specialist training, working at the same time, and I was with them for 3 years while I did that, and around the time that the GP asked me to go there or basically gave me a job offer, I had already been doing some work within the ambulance service in the education department. So every trust will have like a learning and development department, and I did some work with them because I knew I was interested in education. I've been teaching first aid courses for years. I've always enjoyed that side of things, as my 5-year-old self knew that I would enjoy doing it. And around the time that the GP surgery said to me there's a job offer on the table, I had already been asked to come up and teach a lecture at not the university that I did my postgrad diploma at.
Was that at Swansea?
I did my postgrad diploma at Surrey.
Okay.
But back at that point, they used to send students who hadn't done a previous degree to St George's in London to do their specialist education.
Right.
And then those of us who already had degrees, we went to Surrey to do level 7 study, a master's level. So I'd been asked to go up to St George's as part of my work in the education department for the trust to go and teach the CCAM students about a particular element of drugs. So it was they said, could you come and do a lecture on painkillers, essentially? So I went and delivered this lecture. I was so nervous, and I felt a bit of an imposter at the time as well, because I was probably about 6 months ahead of these students, 6 months, 12 months maybe. So definitely not years ahead of them. And I delivered it, really, really enjoyed it. And shortly after I delivered that lecture, St George's approached me and said that they were looking for a lecturer with a specialist interest in urgent and emergency care. Would I like to join the team? So I essentially then had these 2 job offers: primary care, which would be a daytime job, and then the lecturing as well, which would also be a daytime job. And one of the big factors that swayed into me going down this route was I enjoyed both roles, but also night shifts were becoming increasingly problematic for me. I was really struggling with them. I would get back off a 12-hour 13-hour night shift, having been awake all night, driving around, seeing to patients, and then probably only be able to sleep for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And I realised I needed to make some tough decisions. Even though I loved working for the ambulance service, I could see that realistically it was not going to work for me in the long
Yeah, I
term.
remember, because I remember when, especially when you used to go on shifts and you used to come home late and I couldn't sleep.
Even super late
I
ones.
know. And then she'd tell me about all these scary stories when she was working, and then you know,
I
I
shouldn't have done.
she shouldn't have told me really, basically. So she'd come in with a utility belt from paramedic suit like Batman, you know. Anyway, but you'd come back, and I was just so relieved that you were back. But also, you know, every time you get headaches, everything, you were tired and run down from that. So currently
Oh,
you're
so
doing that those
yes.
times.
So when we met, I was
Yeah,
doing that. I was lecturing, I think 3 days a week, and then working in primary care two
yeah.
days a week. And to set the context for what happens next, I think it's worth saying that I've always been very interested in the effect that lifestyle nutrition has upon how I felt as an individual, certainly. And that had always been something that I tended to, I guess, read about in my spare time. Going back like 10 years ago, it was really when podcasts started kicking off big time, there were these people that you could listen to who were talking about nutrition, etc. So I already had that knowledge that an experience that of my own that I was building up in the background of, oh yeah, like if I eat this way, it helps me to feel so much better. If I eat that way, it doesn't serve me, etc., etc. So that's probably an important caveat to bring in, is that
What's
it had
happening?
already been an area of particular interest of mine
Yeah.
alongside the conventional healthcare that I was providing.
So we then go to, and I remember this distinctly. Then COVID hit for both of us, and we had to make some real choices. Don't want to get into too much, but we had to make some choices of our belief systems, of what we believe we should do, shouldn't do, and things like that. And I think it was that point, because you remember saying to me, I think I want to train as a health coach, wasn't it? I think you said.
Yeah, so essentially, when I went into primary care, to start off with, I had quite long appointment times because I was learning the ropes. I needed that extra time in order to be able to just slow everything down and be safe, essentially. And as I got more experienced, obviously that appointment time, rightly so, shortened.
Sure.
And I had, I think, an overly idealistic hope of being able to spend time with patients, to be able to really dig down into what was going on for them in their life. And don't get me wrong, I was able to do that for lots of patients actually. But often I found that I didn't have the time to be able to really do it in a way that would help them for the long term. And I didn't want to just be giving quick fixes to people. I wanted to be able to, you know, help them figure out what changes they could make that would actually really benefit their health and well-being, rather than just giving them a quick fix and a medication
Yeah,
to go away with.
because I know in the UK, I think the average time for a GP appointment is about 8 minutes. And they always say that when a patient walks out the door, the thing they say just as they walk out the door is really what the issue is. And both you and I have talked about how, having what you get with private care is time. It's that
Yeah.
time, and really that each individual is holistic, and that they're an individual with their own issues, chemically, physically, and emotionally. So from there, you went on and trained as a health coach.
Yeah, so essentially, I left primary care and did my health coach training. So I came across the concept of health coaching when, surprise, surprise, I was listening to a podcast, and I thought, oh, actually, that would be something really useful to be able to work alongside somebody and to be able to help them develop their own goals of what would work for them as an individual, rather than just a carte blanche. This is what, you know, everybody should do, which doesn't work for everybody. It needs to be tailored and individualized.
And also, what I noticed when you did that was the gap in the amount of people in relation to gut, and women in relation to cortisol and hormones. And so talk a little bit about let's talk about the gut and the amazing things you found out and why you were drawn, also particularly looking at tests with leaky gut, and explain what leaky gut actually is.
So leaky gut is, well, essentially to describe it probably as simply as I can think of is that the gut is obviously where all our food comes in, and then nutrition is taken from the gut into the body. So there is this communication, this, this membrane essentially whereby
Yeah.
nutrients pass through. And ordinarily, under ideal circumstances, the junctions between the cells in the membrane should be nice and tight so that it will only let through well digested food particles
Okay.
that the body can then use to grow, repair, etc., etc. But unfortunately, lots of things can impact on the tightness of these junctions, and it can essentially then they can become essentially a lot looser.
Okay.
And then larger food particles can then pass through into the bloodstream. So they're not properly digested at that point. So that's why it's called leaky gut, essentially, because of these larger food particles leaking through. And rightly so, the body can then goes, oh, wait a minute, this shouldn't be here, then sees it as a foreign substance and will then set up an inflammatory response or an immune response, excuse me, in the body to that particular substance. And lots of things can cause, these tight junctions to become leaky. Illness can cause it. If people have just done like a marathon, their gut will be a bit leaky after the marathon. So intense exercise, stress can cause it. Certain medications can cause it. There's a lot of different things that can
So
impact.
did you get that with things like
body.
diverticulitis as well?
Diverticulitis is something different, and diverticulitis is when somebody typically who's had chronic or recurrent constipation over the years and has been straining to open their bowels, what tends to happen is that pressure will then, as they're straining, causes like little outpouchings in the wall of the intestine, and those little sacs can then get those little sacs are called diverticuli.
Right.
And then if food or like bits of stool like build up in there,
Yeah.
it can then get infected, and that's then diverticulitis when
Okay,
there's
so
that inflammation
like
that goes alongside it.
congestion within the little diverticuli in
Yes.
those areas there.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
So that's diverticulitis, which is kind of everything in the gut is all linked, but is different to leaky guts.
Because I think it's about something like it's quite interesting with working with my patients. I often say how we talk about gut instinct, gut reaction, gut feeling, and it's about 80% of the nerve endings, I think, roughly about that in the digestive system, the gut. And now the work that we're looking at, the microbiome people are talking about, they're talking about the gut being the second brain. Some people can call it the first brain, for example, if you're emotional or you're upset. It's not often your head you hold, it's your stomach, butterflies in the stomach and things like that. So when these tests are done, how are they done? What's the process of these tests?
Tests in terms of
How is it done
leaky
by,
gut.
yeah, how do they take blood? Just, I mean, I know what it's done, but explain let's say somebody comes to you and you want to do these leaky gut tests. What does that involve?
Yeah, so probably good to like put a bit of context to this as well in terms of when I trained as a health coach, obviously developed an appreciation for how important the gut is for the whole body health. Like you can't just have and this is one thing that often happens in medicine is that one part of the body is dealt with as a single thing. Oh, you've got this problem with this, and the whole person isn't looked at. And lots of different conditions are impacted by the gut and the health of the gut, etc., etc. So I became interested in helping, people who had gut issues, particularly irritable bowel syndrome, and which this particular type of food sensitivity testing and then some elimination can be really helpful with. So I can't remember where I came across the company that I use that provides the testing. I think when I was at a conference that was all centered around lifestyle medicine and helping people, develop their health and well-being from a holistic perspective. And I thought, oh, actually, that sounds like something that would be really useful for me to be able to use with clients. So essentially, let's call it the leaky gut testing, just to keep things simple. But essentially looks for this particular immune response, so what's called an IgG immune response to these food particles. Now, everybody will have some kind of, if you test everybody, there will be
a number.
elevated markers that
Yeah.
come up for different foods. That's part of it's the way the body works. Like, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So what we're essentially looking at is really super elevated reactions to specific foods within the context of somebody who has gut symptoms. So irritable bowel syndrome is essentially a syndrome whereby people present with maybe constipation, maybe diarrhea, maybe a mix of the two. They'll often have bloating that goes along with it. And it's really important that people don't jump to the conclusion of, oh, I must have IBS without seeing their GP.
Yeah, because that's the thing.
Because it can be caused, that can very much be caused by other
Yeah.
conditions that absolutely need treatment.
Because I know I come across, and again, I've talked about this quite a bit, as I come across people that come to me and they've been told they've got a particular thing, and then I do neurological testing or get testing done, and actually it isn't that. And the expression, if you give somebody a hammer, everything's a nail. And unfortunately, I think that, unfortunately too, because I do think, and again, we've talked about this, but I do think there is a change for that more kind of holistic approach to look at the individual. And it comes essentially down to time. And I think in England, the NHS is just completely overloaded. And that means less and less time to really get to know that. Because there was a time, I think we came to the UK in 1973, and everybody knew the doctor. They knew the doctor, they knew his name, he knew you, he knew your kids and your grandchildren, and there was a lot more time. And now that's gone by the way. And I remember how you would come back really frustrated sometimes because you don't find out what happens to the patient afterwards, or you kind of knew that there was something else that was needed. So, when you and I met, so I trained as a nutritionist and brought that element into our relationship. But I want you to talk about that story after we'd had a conversation, and it was related to magnesium. You had a patient. Do you remember that? Just this, I love the story because it's an illustration of how something so simple, when not looked at. Because a lot of the times, if you have a condition or a symptom and then it can't be found, the automatic thing for that is go, oh, it's all in your head. It's not all in your head. They just haven't found the solution. So tell me about the magnesium story again, because I think the listeners will be really interested in that.
So I'm a big, and even maybe just to go back to like the gut sensitivity testing, the leaky gut testing, there's so much of the basics that I think should be addressed before necessarily we go down routes of testing, etc., etc. And often the basics don't get done. So, for example, with the gut, like, how are we eating our food? Like, digestion starts in the mouth. If we're not sitting down and chewing our food in a nice relaxed state,
Can I just, the reason I'm laughing there is because I eat too fast. And
does.
And Naomi's smiling now because she's always telling me to slow down. And interestingly enough, I had we went away to Wales to see the family in Wales. And I thought I'd chew a toffee, as you do, licorice toffee. I thought that's unusual, licorice toffee, which became very crunchy, and it turned out my crown was stuck in it. And so now I have to chew slowly. So there's a silver lining to everything. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's that knowing look you might, if you're watching this on live, like on YouTube, as opposed to listening to it, you'll see that wife's knowing look when she looks at her husband going, So yeah, anyway, that's fine.
Yeah. So I think, like, oftentimes we need to get the basics in place first. And this, certainly in terms of like gut health and so forth, but with other things as well, in terms of like our basic nutrition, before we start to look for the more specialized answers that we might need as an individual. So this particular patient that I saw came to me in the GP surgery, and she was in her 40s, she came in with headaches. And so I took a whole history, found out that she had experienced high blood pressure in the past and that she had been medicated for it. She had then been able to come off the medication and her blood pressure had been fine. So she came in to see me with a complaint of headaches, and when I did her blood pressure was actually pretty high again. And because something that we always think about when somebody has headaches is, oh, is that high blood pressure causing or potentially contributing to headaches? And it's not good if the blood vessels are under super high pressure. So I did her blood pressure and it was pretty high. And she said to me, I really don't want to go back on medication. So I said, well, let's just complete the examination. Let's see what everything else shows up. So I did a full neurological examination on her. And from that, I realized that she was probably magnesium deficient. And I, and I said to her, like, you're probably magnesium deficient. And one of the effects of being magnesium deficient is hypertension or high blood pressure, because magnesium helps to relax the blood vessels appropriately. So her blood pressure wasn't to the point of being dangerously high. And as I took the history, as I did all the other examinations, there was nothing to make me concerned about her headaches, that there was a nasty cause of it. Because again, we're always thinking, or I always go, what is the worst thing that this could be? And then work my
backwards,
way
yeah.
back from there, because it's a safe way to approach it. It means I don't miss things and just go in somewhat blasé and think, oh, everything's probably fine. And then potentially miss something I shouldn't miss. So I wasn't unduly concerned about her. So we made a plan that she would start taking magnesium supplements and she would come back in a couple of weeks' time for me to see how she was doing, recheck her blood pressure, etc. And I obviously also safety netted that should X, Y, or Z happen, that she knew what she needed to do so that she wasn't left just with things potentially getting worse in that 2 weeks before she came to see me. So she came back and saw me 2 weeks later, having been taking magnesium for a couple of weeks. And straight away she said to me, oh my word, like my headaches have gone, they've cleared up. And she was having headaches every day. So she was finding it really debilitating. And when I checked her blood pressure was now back to normal. So that was one of those where I thought, we need to get the basics right. The basics of nutrition. So many people these days are magnesium deficient because we used to get it in the soil, which would then be taken up into our fruits, our vegetables, our grains, and it's been depleted from the soil now. So people don't get it as easily as they do, even if they eat what they think is a relatively healthy diet.
I mean, it's a couple of things that just while we're talking about magnesium, if you're listening and think, right, I'm going to go out and get magnesium, try not to get a magnesium called magnesium citrate, because think citric acid, because it can upset your stomach. And also the soil that we're talking about is a mutual friend of ours, David Thomas, and he had a peer-reviewed article published in the Times, comparative study from 1940 to 1995 in mineral depletion in a cross range of things from meats and everything. But I always thought, I'm going to remember one statistic that was quite alarming, and this is across the board, by the way, but an iron in 1940, I think, was like 76% less iron in a carrot. And so when people talk about, but I eat fruit and I eat vegetable, and it's that, and those nutrients that we see. And also when you talked about the basics and stripping it down, the other thing I want to say, there's another thing to that, which is I had a patient who presented with alarming symptoms. And I had to do the reverse, which is do the neuro testing and the scans. And unfortunately, as a result of that, we did find something horrible. So it's always, the body's kind of tricky, isn't it? Because it can present with something and you think it's really bad and it's good. It can present with something really good and it's really bad. And I think that's where I really believe that a really good skill set. So one thing that happen is Naomi and I, for example, unfortunately, I don't know why this is, but if we're ever out together, we just attract. Oh yeah, it hasn't happened yet. Shh. But we do attract accidents. People coming off bikes all the time and everything. But one of the things that's really important is, and we have it in our relationship, and I'd love to see it more in general, is that if we come across something, I definitely defer to Naomi's skill set, because senior paramedic and much more skilled to me as a chiropractor, but equally so, she will defer to me if it's a musculoskeletal issue. And I think the thing I've seen in medicine generally is that inability to actually say, well, I actually don't have the answer. I need to create a team. And we can talk a little bit where we're at now with that and what's so exciting, to see where we're at. Right. So yeah. So let's get back to we talked about magnesium, and you've gone into health coaching, and then I noticed too within your health coaching though there was a lot more women seem to be approaching it. What do you think's going on there? What's happening with cortisol and the hormonal things?
Well, I think typically medicine has been probably quite male oriented in terms of, let's look at the research. Research is carried out on healthy males
Yeah.
in their 20s, 30s. Women are underrepresented in medical research. Women often think we need a more holistic, joined up approach when to our, I'm not saying that men don't, because I absolutely think they do. But I think sometimes our problems can be somewhat more complex and need that bit of a, more holistic approach. And I think that doesn't always fit well with the current medical model of, see the GP and then the GP sends to a specialist who only deals in one thing. So I think that's potentially why. I think women, perhaps, I think maybe we're a bit more conscious about our health and well-being.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I would say that a lot of people come to see me is because the wife has sent them. But I also think the bias, I can't remember, you and I again were talking about this, and you probably don't remember the stats, and
I
I don't
don't.
either. Okay, so basically we were talking about the amount of research and funding that goes into something like erectile dysfunction for men, and yet how little goes into research with, say, menstruation pain, and also the toxicity that has historically been around menstruation products and the lack of education. And yet there's a big, massive push with anything to do with men. I've always said that if men menstruated, there'd be a massive research fund into the pain. And I think women are pretty sort of tough. They just get on with it when it happens. But I did notice when you started your health coaching, there was a lot of that. There was a particular case. I mean, I work with a lot of fibromyalgia patients, don't I? And I got a big following on social media with that. So there was another, we won't name names, obviously, but tell me about this particular patient I sent you with fibromyalgia and the dramatic shift, I think, that happened in that.
So when it's probably appropriate at this point to just talk about how I work with somebody.
Sure.
So when I work with somebody, I'll get them to fill in essentially what's a medical symptom questionnaire, whereby that it asks about a lot of different symptoms related to different body systems and the frequency of those symptoms. And that then helps me to be able to establish, is there any particularly big imbalance in one body system more than another? And for a lot of people, that will be the gut, it will be the digestive tract that shows up issues. So for this particular person, they did indeed have, quite a few gut symptoms. And these were, and again, to be clear, I always make sure that somebody has had any potentially significant medical condition
Right. Any pathologies underlying?
excluded. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if appropriate, I'll say to somebody like, you need to go and see your GP. Get this checked out first, and then if everything's fine, then come back and work with me at a later point. But for this particular person, we did go down the gut sensitivity testing route because they did have symptoms of leaky gut. And essentially, to explain the process very quickly, it's a finger prick blood test. The blood test goes off to the lab, who then looks for significantly elevated markers in foods. As we mentioned already, like everybody will have some,
Sure.
everybody will come back with some reactions if we tested the whole population.
There'll be something. I mean,
There's very rarely going to be.
yeah.
I think I remember asking the guy at the lab, like, have you ever had anybody who never had anything? And he said one person in all the
It's
years.
so unusual. I mean, I think I had, what did I have, 4?
Yeah,
Which was
you
like
had 4, which is like,
pretty
you
insignificant.
know, it's
But you're
insignificant.
testing for how many? 200? 200
Depending on the
markers?
test, yeah,
Okay.
200,
Right.
200 different foods
Yeah.
is what they'll assess against.
Okay.
And if somebody comes back with really highly elevated ones across a significant number, that's the key bit, because it's not just about the test in isolation, it's about the person as a whole as well. Then we'll work to eliminate the highest reactive foods
Okay.
for a 3-month period, and then slowly reintroduce
So
them.
this is the bit I didn't sort of get. So when you slowly introduced,
Yep. Within that 3-month period of
okay,
time, you're essentially giving the digestive
to
tract a
heal.
bit of a break
Okay.
to heal, and if necessary, then it depends. I might add in some digestive enzymes for somebody, because then they can break down their food more effectively,
Okay.
which then means they get the nutrients that their body needs to be able to heal and repair more effectively. We might add in zinc, because that's really good for cell repair. So it depends on the person. It's always very much an individualized process. But yeah, for that particular person, within about 2 or 3 weeks of cutting out their really reactive foods, they felt, they had so much more energy. It really made a
Because they could
significant
walk up the
impact.
stairs before, they're having problems walking up the stairs and
Yeah.
afterwards. But I mean, the one thing I think is quite sad about all of this, really, to some extent, is that you are only allowed to treat, you're only covered insurance-wise to treat people in the UK, because a lot of people listening will be in America and around the world. So from that point of view, do you have to say to listeners, I'm really sorry, but if you're in the UK, it's fine.
Yeah.
You can work with you. So there. Okay, so what's the next step in the journey? So we've gone from training as a health coach. Let's now come up to date of the exciting new project that's going on now.
Yeah.
Talk about that
So
and why and what you've missed about from doing online on sort of Zoom or stuff.
yeah, so I've always worked with people online via Zoom, as you know,
Yeah.
and I really miss that human interaction. And in fact, part of what part of why I left part of why I left primary care as well was that a lot of it was moving to telephone consultations. Don't get me wrong, like there absolutely is a time and a place for telephone consultations. It doesn't suit me as an individual. Like I've honestly, like I used to hate as a child, even a teenager, like making phone calls. I hated it. People say, oh, like phone so and so, and being like, oh, do I have to? Because for me, I think I find it quite hard to take stuff in just by hearing it with like no other context. And I have really missed like working face to face with people. And yes, I use Zoom, which is great because you can still you've still got that visual feedback to a certain extent, but it's not the same as being sat in the room with the
Yeah, I
person.
agree. I think, but even I'd say that if you call me on the phone or I call you, our phone conversations aren't really, really long, just because we like just to, you can see the face and what's going on there.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Zoom to next bit.
So the clinic in which you work as a chiropractor is expanding.
Yeah.
And essentially I was asked if I would like to come along and do health assessments for people in person.
Yeah.
So that would involve comprehensive blood tests, your basic physiological measurements like height, weight, blood pressure, heart rate, all those types of things. And along with that, a health and wellbeing assessment as well. So that essentially the idea is somebody would undergo all this assessment, and then I would then provide them. I won't say I will provide them, because when I work with somebody to create a plan for how they can improve their health and well-being is like very much a collaborative process. So I wouldn't say to somebody, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. We would have a conversation together about what the goal is, and what things they can do in their life to help them achieve that goal.
And I think what's really at the clinic, I mean, I'm going to mention the clinic because we're both excited about it. It's called the Vale Health Clinic, VALE Health
Hmm.
Clinic in Tunbridge Wells. You can look it up on the internet. But what I'm really excited about, it's a culmination of what you and I have both dreamed of,
Hmm.
believed of. If we have the finance to do it ourselves, we would have done it, which is a clinic where you have everything from cardiologists to facelifts to hair transplant to aesthetics to GPs to gynae, chiropractic, body work, counseling. And what I love about it is like it really allows you to go, do you know what? I've gone as far as I can with this patient,
Hmm.
or maybe there's a collaborative approach for
Hmm.
that holistic when right back at the beginning of this interview where you've talked about being able to say, hey, maybe I don't know what this is,
Hmm.
but to have it on your own doorstep. And I think that that's really for the future for health. I'd love to see more polyclinics like that
Hmm.
opening up. Unfortunately or fortunately, it depends which way you look at it, it is private. But equally so, I think what I don't know if you agree with me, but I think what private medicine does is it does and complementary is it gives you time.
Hmm.
And that time is the thing where you really feel you listen to. I mean, I had some MRIs recently, didn't I? Some
Hmm.
scans and that. And the guy was amazing, wasn't he? He was
Hmm.
such a nice consultant,
Hmm.
but he really took his time. And that's what I have with patients is I never want a patient to one feel like they're coming to see me for signing up for hundreds and hundreds of treatment.
No.
Really just I'm going to listen to them. But
Hmm.
I think the key is to empower patients not to need you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's always, I come from the philosophy of each person is their own expert. And yes, they might need somebody like me to come alongside them to give them a bit of help, a bit of a helping hand in navigating their way, maybe through a period of confusion or getting some clarity on something. But ultimately, if somebody says to me like, "Oh, I know you suggested this, but I really feel it's like not right for me," like that is, good. They're listening to their own expertise and they're going with what they feel is right for their body. And I think that's really what I hope to be able to help empower people to do, is to be able to step into their own expertise and just really make the most of it.
So in terms of people getting hold of you, because this is a good junction for that,
Hmm.
what's going to be the best? I mean, obviously they can come to Tunbridge Wells and Kent and come to the
Yeah.
Vale Health Clinic and go to the website and book in. But
Yep.
if they want to reach out to you in
Mhm.
a more sort of, one-to-one or before that, even have a
Mhm.
conversation, what's the best way to do that?
So my website is www.naomilafite.com.
Yeah. Can I
So
spell the feet for people?
yeah,
Because
sure.
we
We'll put it in the show notes.
Well, we'll put it in the show notes. But the other thing too that's quite interesting is that when we got married, everybody suddenly thought Naomi spoke French because I speak French. She's got a French surname,
I
so
don't speak
she doesn't
French.
speak French. She speaks Welsh.
I don't speak much Welsh
No,
either,
I.
please.
This is where we go backwards and forwards. She's a bit of what do you call it? Imposter syndrome. Yeah,
I really don't. I
she's
I've
really
forgotten so much.
she's really good. I'm her biggest cheerleader, and she's her biggest downer. She puts herself down quite a lot, but she's a smart cookie. Anyway, so Lafitte is Laf for Freddie, Itte, because we've been somewhere and people have gone Lafetti, and
Latif, I think that
Latif.
one.
Yeah,
Mm.
we are.
So yeah, so my
Yeah,
website, and at the moment, I send out a newsletter every so often, just
yeah.
essentially things around health and
And
well-being.
people can subscribe to challenges. You've got various different challenges for autumn and things,
Yeah,
different
I'm
times of the
currently
year.
just about to launch an autumn reset challenge. I think it starts September the 22nd, and
Okay.
it's essentially a series of prompts that lands in people's email inboxes for a month, designed to help them just a bit of a reset after the
Okay.
summer, ready for the autumn and winter.
And that's Naomi Lafitte is a
Mm.
.co.com.
.com.
Okay, so
Hmm.
.com. So Naomi Lafitte. That's it
Yep.
at. Give it to
No,
me again. What is it
that's my
again?
website, www.naomilafeete.com.
There we go. You
As
see,
simple as straightforward.
she often says to me, she says, "The face looks like it's listening, but it's not." And then we'll have a conversation. I'll go, "You're not listening to me," and then she'll repeat back everything I've said. It's so annoying. She's got retention.
Many years as a paramedic.
Yeah, but tell me that story a bit. When you were a kid and your mum didn't think that you were You read the books. Tell me about the books in the library. It's quite funny,
So
actually.
I am an avid reader.
You're a bookie. Well, we're both bookies, yeah.
Let's just
So
say that every so often I have to go through, and it pains me, but to brutally prune the
yeah,
bookcase because I have acquired too many, and Kindle doesn't really work for me. I'm
no.
not a big fan of Kindle books. It's not the same as an actual book. And
When you were little, and
when
your
I was
mum.
little,
Yeah.
with my we used to go to a library that allowed us to get 8 library books out every week, and Dad would take us on a Saturday so that Mum could get a bit of a break to do some housework. And I would come back, and by the end of the weekend, I would have finished all my 8 books. And they would be like proper, like thick children's books,
Yeah.
not like
Not dinky little
not
things.
storybook.
No, no, no.
Yeah. And Mum thought that there was no way that I could have retained that. There was no way I could possibly have read the book and yeah, and
And she
understood
tested
it.
you.
She used to flip it open and ask me a
Yeah.
random question from it.
That's quite
And I
funny.
always got it right.
So,
Unfortunately, my memory is now not that good
no,
as it
no,
was when I was that age,
no, you're
much to my
no,
relief. I need to
you,
work a bit more now.
she's smarter than me. But basically, so yeah, so they can get hold of you like that.
Mhm.
And you're going to be from September. This we're coming in September
September,
now.
October, I'm not sure exactly when
This
it's
year,
gonna, oh,
2025.
this year,
Yeah.
2025. Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
be offering in-person health assessments. And then the hope is then as well, if somebody says, great, like I want to make these changes, but I want a bit of support in implementing them, a bit of accountability, then
Yeah.
we can carry on that, we can expand that then into kind of a coaching,
Okay.
coaching
And take
sessions,
into
which could be online if people wanted them to be
yeah,
online.
yeah. I mean
Yeah, because that
that's the
initial
option.
face to face will have happened, which
Yeah.
I feel is always that bit where you really get to know somebody. So,
And I think that's really important.
mm,
Right. So we have a tradition, as you know, because you know, obviously,
hmm
you're my wife. Why wouldn't you know? Of I said to Naomi this morning, favorite quote. She said, "Oh, I've got so many, but just give me one quote
hmm
that you like.
hmm
If maybe it's not your favorite, but at least you like, and but tell me why you like it."
Probably less of a quote and maybe
Okay.
more
Say
something
it.
that yeah, maybe more
Talk to me,
something
good.
that I live by, which is that life happens for me,
Okay.
not to me.
And tell me why.
And I did do a quick Google to try and see if I could figure out where that quote originated from. Of course, like I'm an academic, like cite your sources. I couldn't find a source to cite. But essentially just the whole philosophy around, that I
Mm.
have had, my life has not been easy, has it?
Yeah.
We have not touched on anything of
Yeah.
that in this
We're not
podcast,
going to
but
go into all
we're
that,
not going to
but
go into it.
yeah.
But it has not been an easy life,
No.
but it has all helped to shape me into the
I
person
agree.
that I am today. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it hadn't been for some of those really tough
I
things.
agree.
So whether that be like the good things that happen, the tough things that happen, like they're all happening for me in a way to help shape me into a better person and help me grow. So that's really something that I try and oh, somebody asked me once actually. She said, "Oh, you're always like really happy. You're always so positive and cheerful." I don't think I am, but I've had a few people say that to me. So obviously that's how I come across. And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, maybe it is because that I think of life as happening for me, not to me, even when
Okay.
things are tough. Like there's a purpose behind it, and
There's a higher consciousness, and definitely, and I think there's a less of a victim
yeah,
mentality.
exactly.
And I mean, you know how positive I am,
Mm,
and people will say that I'm annoyingly positive.
hmm
I will always look at two sides of a story if I can. I'll always try to find the middle ground, and finding the middle ground actually has been up since you've taught me that really, which is life isn't black and white, it's grey, right? It's a bit in the
mm.
middle, and
It's
I
nuanced. Well, I like to think of it as lots of different colours
yeah, the rainbow
rather than
colours,
black and white.
happy bunny colours.
Let's be positive.
Cool. All right, guys. So yeah, that was great. I actually got to the best part about this. My wife actually talked and I listened. So that's maybe we're going to do more podcasts. Maybe when I'm not listening, she say, "Darling, can we get just do a podcast?" And she can tell me about all the things that I need to listen to more often. Cool. All right. Thank you for being here once again for Zen Footsteps, and say you can reach out to Naomi anytime you like. You can listen back to those details and contacts, and we hope that you'll join us for the next episode. Um, Definitely, if you know anybody who wants to come on the podcast, please let me know. Anybody's got an inspirational story. You don't have to be this amazing, clever, scientific person. There's people from all walks of life. So please just let me know. You can go to www.zenfootsteps@gmail.com. That's zenfootsteps@gmail.com. And if you want to follow me as well on TikTok, it's at JLLZen. So take care, and we hope that you'll join us for the next episode. Bye.